You'd think after 20 years living with someone, you'd know who your husband was. You'd think the person who shared your bed, who held your hand through the hardest parts of your life, would be entirely visible to you, a finished book, a completed picture. I didn't. I found a tiny, insignificant key which was about to shatter my world and show me the rest of his life that I knew absolutely nothing about. It's difficult to share a story this painful, but I felt compelled to tell the truth. If you connect with this feeling, if you want to hear how this kind of deception unfolds, please take a moment and hit the subscribe button now. It's the best way to let us know that you want to watch more stories like mine. We appreciate you being here. My name is Clara, and for 2 decades, I truly thought I was the lucky one. My husband, Michael, was everything the world measures success by. He was a high-end aviation consultant. That meant frequent trips, Singapore 1 week, London the next, a life of first-class travel, expensive suits, and a 6-figure salary that afforded us everything. Everything, that is, except the one thing I wanted most. We lived in a stunning home outside Atlanta, a sprawling place with a beautiful manicured garden. That garden was my sanctuary. It was where I went to escape the silence of the big house. Because despite the granite countertops and the luxury cars in the driveway, our home was always too quiet. We had no children. That was the shadow that fell over all our sunny days. We tried everything, years of invasive procedures, endless appointments, hope followed by crushing grief. After the last failed attempt, I surrendered. I told Michael, tears streaming down my face, "Let's adopt. There are so many children who need us." He looked at me with that cool, rational gaze of his, the one he used to negotiate million-dollar deals. "No, Clara, I want a child of my own blood, or none at all." It was a cold, cruel statement. It felt like a rejection not just of adoption, but of my love. It felt like he was saying, "You are not enough," but I loved him. I swallowed the bitterness and focused on the garden. I poured all my maternal energy into the earth, nurturing the roses and the hydrangeas until they were perfect. It was in that very garden that the first seed of doubt was planted. It was a Tuesday morning. Michael was packed, ready to head to the airport for a supposed 5-day trip to Berlin. I was sitting on the patio, savoring the warmth of my tea in my favorite delicate china mug. The sun was just hitting the petals of the prize hydrangeas. I watched him as he walked to his car. He looked immaculate as always. But then he stopped. He veered off the paved path and walked right up to the hydrangeas, a spot I usually tended myself. He glanced quickly toward the house. He thought I was inside, showering. But I was there, watching him over the rim of my mug. He knelt down, not like a man admiring the flowers, but like a man performing a quick, nervous errand. He pulled out a small metallic tin from his pocket, the kind that might hold breath mints, only heavier. He used his car key to quickly scrape away a small patch of dirt and slip the tin inside the hole. He patted the earth down firmly with the side of his Italian leather shoe, making sure the dirt was perfectly smooth. Then, just like that, he stood up, got into the Mercedes, and was gone. Off to Berlin. I didn't move for 5 minutes. My tea went cold. The act was so jarringly out of place. Why would a man who owned 2 houses and managed millions bury a tiny tin in the ground? It was clumsy, yet meticulous. I set my mug down on the patio table. The sound of the china on the glass felt loud in the sudden silence. I went inside and waited. I waited until I knew he was halfway to the airport. Then I returned to the spot. I grabbed the small gardening trowel I kept by the shed. My hands were trembling, not with fear yet, but with the consuming, toxic curiosity of a person who realizes their entire reality might be fiction. I knelt down in the dirt, the expensive fabric of my yoga pants brushing the soil. I dug shallowly, exactly where he had dug. Within seconds, I hit metal. I pulled out the tin. It was cool, heavy, and unmarked. My breath hitched. I flipped the lid open. Inside, resting on a small piece of velvet, was a single silver key. It was totally generic, shiny, with no identifying numbers or tags. It didn't look like a house key or a car key. It looked like the kind of key that opened something sealed off. I held it, spinning it slowly between my thumb and forefinger. It was just a small, neutral object, but I knew instantly that it was the key to unlocking the entire gilded cage of my marriage. I couldn't confront him. Not yet. I had no proof, only a key that opened something. If I accused him now, he would deny it, and the key would disappear forever. I had to be smarter than Michael. I had to be strategic. I drove immediately to the nearest hardware store. I walked straight to the key-cutting machine. My heart was pounding, the sound echoing in the brightly lit aisle. I handed the clerk the key and said, "I just need one copy, please." He didn't ask questions. He just cut the key. I left the store with 2 identical silver keys in my purse. I returned home and went straight back to the hydrangeas. I replaced the original key and the metal tin exactly where Michael had hidden them. The duplicate key was now hidden deep inside my jewelry box. It was cold, silent evidence that my husband was leading a life that I knew nothing about. I thought I was crazy. Maybe it was just a key to a safe deposit box, holding some investments. Maybe it was an old locker from college. I desperately wanted to believe that. But that little key, tucked away in my jewelry box, felt like a loaded gun. I knew, intuitively, that Michael wasn't protecting money. He was protecting a secret. And the silence in the house, the silence I thought was just the absence of children, now felt like the silence of a lie being carefully guarded. I made the call the next morning. I couldn't risk confrontation. I needed facts. I called Josh, a private investigator. I told him I needed him to watch my husband when he said he was going out of town. I told him Michael was cheating, though I had no idea who, where, or when. I just needed him to follow the threads of the truth that were now dangling so precariously in my perfect garden. That was only the beginning. That was only the beginning of my double life. I wasn't just Clara, the society wife who tended her flawless garden and chaired the charity galas. I was now Clara, the spy, the detective of my own devastation, the woman who carried a secret silver key, the cold, hard evidence that proved nothing and everything all at once. I had given Josh everything: Michael's extensive travel calendar, his typical routes to the airport, and a hefty retainer. I expected immediate drama. I expected a call within the first hour of his first business trip, detailing a slip-up, a clandestine meeting, a second woman waiting at an anonymous hotel bar. But Michael wasn't a reckless man. He was an aviation consultant, a job that demanded perfection, adherence to rigid protocol, and impeccable timing. He was a man who planned for every contingency, who could anticipate every angle, and that meticulousness, which had once been the bedrock of my admiration, now became the engine of my torment. The first trip came quickly, 5 days, supposedly, to Paris. I waited. The calls from Josh were professional, punctual, and utterly maddening. Mrs. Davies. He landed at Charles de Gaulle exactly on schedule, took a pre-booked car, not a taxi, straight to the George V Hotel. He had dinner with a colleague, Mr. Laurent, from the aerospace firm he's consulting for. Dinner lasted 2 hours, no anomalies. He was on a video conference all morning. I confirmed the hotel staff saw him. He didn't leave the hotel until 6 p.m. Trip after trip, to Dubai, to Frankfurt, to a quick domestic run to Chicago. The results were identical. Michael was a machine. His flights were logged. His hotels verified. His meetings were documented through public firm reports or expense records Josh easily cross-checked. There were no missing hours, no sudden detours, no mysterious late-night phone calls that weren't routed through his secure corporate line. The truth was a relentless, boring disappointment. I would pace the silent, marble hallways of our home, the silence amplifying my doubt. The house, which I once loved, now felt like a gilded cage built over a massive lie, my own lie. I was spending thousands of dollars to prove my husband was a cheat, and every report confirmed he was a saint. The guilt became a living, breathing creature in my chest. It gnawed at my self-esteem. I was actively working to destroy the very stability I desperately needed. Why was I inventing this paranoia? Michael was kind. When he was home, he was attentive. He always remembered our anniversary, always brought back exactly the right kind of rare tea or a beautifully crafted piece of jewelry from his travels. He was the perfect husband, and I was the ungrateful, unhinged wife. The logical voice, the cool, rational voice of Michael himself, started winning the argument in my head. The key is meaningless, Clara. It's for an old storage unit with paperwork. You're trying to replace the emptiness of the child we don't have with drama. You are wasting money because you are heartbroken. The childlessness was the deepest, most festering wound. It had been years since we stopped trying, but the grief never faded. It had simply gone quiet. Michael's refusal to adopt, I want a child of my own blood or none at all, had always felt like a veto on my entire maternal future. Now, coupled with the key, it felt less like a preference and more like a cruel, calculated shield. I would sit on the edge of our massive, perfect bed and look at my life. The expensive sheets, the custom-made furniture. I had everything. But I was so miserable. I wanted the key to open a safe deposit box. I needed it to be harmless. The tension became unbearable. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I stopped tending the garden with my usual care. The hydrangeas drooped slightly, and the weeds began to creep in, a physical reflection of the chaos in my soul. 2 full months passed. Michael completed 5 international trips and 3 domestic runs. Josh's reports were monotonous. I finally called Josh, the heavy floral scent of the drooping hydrangeas drifting through the open window, almost suffocating me. "Josh," I said, my voice thin and shaking, "I'm calling it off. I think I'm overreacting. I think I'm paranoid. I'm wasting your time and my money." There was a moment of silence on the line. I could hear the city noise in the background, a contrast to the sterile quiet of my home. "Mrs. Davies," Josh replied, his voice calm, steady, and utterly non-committal. "I understand completely. Sometimes there's nothing to find. But your intuition was strong. I respect your decision. However," he paused. And that pause was the longest, most terrifying sound I had ever heard. "However, he has a site inspection planned for tomorrow. It's domestic, only 3 hours away, in North Georgia. He leaves at 7 a.m., back by 5 p.m. It's the last date on the retainer. Give me 1 more week. Let me just follow that final one. If it's clean, we close the file." My entire body was screaming at me to say no, to save the money, save the marriage, and save myself from the final confirmation that I was losing my mind. But the sight of the untouched hole in the garden, the place where I had buried the tin and my sanity, forced the word out of me. Fine, Josh, I whispered. One more week. I spent the next day living in a state of suspended animation. I couldn't focus. I couldn't cook. I barely spoke to Michael, who was focused on his laptop, meticulously checking details for his site inspection. He looked up once and smiled, a warm, genuine smile that sliced through my chest with the sharp clarity of glass. "Everything all right, sweetheart?" he asked. "Perfectly fine, Michael," I lied, my voice sounding hollow and tinny, like an old recording. "Just a little tired." He nodded, satisfied, and returned to his work. The ease with which he shifted his focus, the absolute lack of anxiety on his face, convinced me yet again. I am wrong. The key is nothing. I have ruined everything. I went to bed early, praying for sleep, praying for a clean report the next evening. I prayed that I could return to being the loving wife and forget the chilling cold of the duplicate key tucked away in my jewelry box. The alarm went off at 6 a.m. Michael was already up, showering. I heard the familiar sounds of his morning routine, the expensive shaving cream, the spray of his cologne, the zip of his suitcase. He came into the bedroom dressed in smart casual wear, kissed me lightly on the forehead, and said, "See you tonight, my love. Site inspection shouldn't take long." And then he was gone. I laid in bed, listening to the Mercedes pull away, already drafting the apology in my head. "I'm so sorry, Michael. I haven't been myself." I forced myself out of bed. I walked to the kitchen and made a cup of tea. I didn't want the warmth of the mug today. I wanted a shield. I sat on the patio, determined to be calm. It was 8:30 a.m. Michael was supposed to be halfway to North Georgia by now, on his way to an anonymous piece of land. At 9 a.m., my phone rang. It was Josh. His name, Joshpi, flashed on the screen, cutting through my fragile calm and injecting a massive, terrifying shot of pure adrenaline. I knew instantly that this single phone call would justify every agonizing, guilt-ridden penny I had spent and immediately shatter the foundation of my entire life. I answered the phone, my voice barely a tremor. "Clara." Josh's voice was sharp, professional, stripped entirely of its usual detachment. "He didn't go north. He broke routine." You won't believe what Josh said next. I answered the phone, my voice barely a tremor. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped the china mug I was holding. The adrenaline, sharp and cold, had completely overpowered the guilt. "Clara." Josh's voice was stripped of its professional detachment. It was urgent. "He didn't go north. He broke routine. He's not going to a site inspection in North Georgia." My heart slammed against my ribs. It was the confirmation I had spent 2 months and thousands of dollars dreading, but it was also the justification for the paralyzing doubt. I wasn't crazy. "Where, Josh? Where is he?" I whispered, looking around the empty, silent kitchen, suddenly feeling foolish for having trusted the security of those perfect walls. "He went straight to the east side of town. Secure Keep storage facility near the perimeter. Unit 4B, climate-controlled access only." He pulled the Mercedes straight into the secure area, used his fob, and the gate closed right behind him. I couldn't follow him in. Too high security. A storage unit, not a cheap motel, not a luxury villa in the Caribbean, a sterile blue metal building on the outskirts of the city. The sheer banality of the location made the betrayal even colder. He wasn't having a passionate, reckless affair. He was maintaining a meticulous, organized second life. I thanked Josh, my mind already racing, and hung up. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, realizing this was the moment of truth. He was at the storage unit right now. The duplicate key hidden in my jewelry box suddenly felt too far away, I needed the original. I needed to know if my guess was right. I ran. I didn't grab my purse or change out of my silk robe. I ran out the back door and straight to the garden. I didn't use the little trowel. I dropped onto my knees and started digging with my bare hands. The expensive French manicure I'd just gotten was ruined instantly, my fingers sinking into the cold, damp soil. I didn't care. The garden, my sanctuary, was now just a hiding place. I dug frantically around the hydrangeas, exactly where I had watched him bury the tin. My muscles burned with the effort. Then my fingers hit the cold metal. I pulled the tin out of the earth. I felt a massive wave of relief wash over me. The tin was here. He hadn't moved it permanently. He hadn't found the duplicate. He hadn't cleaned up his tracks completely. I fumbled with the lid, desperate to see the key. I flipped the lid open. You won't believe what happened next. My relief evaporated instantly, replaced by a cold, sickening dread that hit me with the force of a physical blow. The tin was empty. The small velvet lining was there. The indentation of the key was still visible in the velvet, but the original silver key was gone. My mind spun. This wasn't a good sign. This was a nightmare. It didn't mean he forgot the key. It meant he took the key this morning. He took it before he left the house. He took it because he needed it right now to access the unit Josh had just identified. The puzzle pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The key belonged to Secure Keep Storage, Unit 4B. And Michael was there, using the key I had watched him bury. He had broken routine not just to cheat, but to access his other life. My immediate thought was a frantic, desperate realization. He must be moving things. He's clearing out his tracks. He must have seen Josh or sensed something was wrong. This was my one chance before the evidence vanished forever. I scrambled back inside the house. I ignored the dirt covering my robe and my hair. I grabbed the duplicate key from my jewelry box, shoving it deep into the pocket of my robe. I grabbed my car keys and my wallet. Nothing else mattered. I called Josh back. "Josh," I gasped, out of breath. "I'm heading there now. I know that key is for Unit 4B. Is he still there?" "Mrs. Davies, you shouldn't—" "Is he still there?" I demanded, already tearing out of the driveway, the expensive car kicking up gravel as I sped toward the perimeter. "Yes. He's been there for 15 minutes. But Clara, please, stay outside. Let me call local backup." "No," I said, my voice stealing into something Michael wouldn't recognize. "This ends today. Tell me which entrance he used." I hung up, Josh's frantic protests swallowed by the roar of the engine. I wasn't driving like Clara, the society wife. I was driving like a woman possessed, racing against the clock of a decade-long lie. The drive was agonizing. Every red light felt like an intentional act of malice. Every minute that passed meant Michael had more time to pack up the life he was living without me. I drove past familiar landmarks, past the perfect golf courses and the immaculate office parks, seeing them all now as backdrops to his elaborate performance. I thought about the money. The money he said was for his future. The money he wouldn't use to adopt a child with me, because he insisted on his own blood. The chilling realization was building. He didn't refuse me a child. He refused me his child. I finally reached the industrial complex. Secure Keep Storage was a massive modern facility surrounded by high metal fencing, accessed only by a secure key fob. It was cold, clean, and utterly impersonal. I spotted Josh's nondescript sedan parked discreetly down the street. He gave me a sharp, urgent wave, pointing toward the main security gate. I pulled the car over, hiding it behind a thick cluster of industrial recycling bins. My body was shaking, but my hands were steady. I took the duplicate silver key out of my robe pocket. It felt like a surgical tool. I got out of the car. The midday sun felt harsh, but the air was cold. Josh approached, his face a mask of worry. "Clara, please, let me wait for him to leave. We'll get in then." "No," I said, walking toward the gate. "He knows the schedule. He's efficient. If I wait, he leaves and the unit is locked." I held up the key. "I have the access. I'm going in." I walked up to the secure pedestrian gate. I held the duplicate key to the sensor. The small green light flashed, and I heard the mechanical click of the lock disengaging. Michael had programmed this unit. He had visited this place often enough that the key fob system recognized the copy of the access key he kept hidden from me. I pushed the heavy gate open and slipped inside. I walked quickly, silently across the concrete yard. It was eerily quiet. Rows upon rows of identical blue metal doors stretched out before me, a silent army of secrets. "Unit 4B, Josh had said. I found the main climate-controlled building. I slipped through the electronic door and into the long, brightly lit interior corridor. The air was unnaturally warm, humming with the sound of the central air conditioning, a perfect, stable environment for preserving whatever life Michael had built here. I walked down the corridor. My footsteps, usually quiet in my soft shoes, felt deafening on the concrete floor. Every shadow seemed to shift. I passed Unit 4A, Unit 4B, Unit 4C. Wait. I quickly backtracked. Unit 4B. The blue metal door was not fully closed. It was ajar, a tiny slit of darkness at the seam. He was either inside or he had just left and hadn't secured the door fully, a massive lapse in his usual perfect protocol. I stopped about 10 feet away. I listened. Nothing. Only the hum of the ventilation. I walked the final few steps and pressed my ear to the cold metal door. My breath caught in my throat. I could smell him, the familiar scent of his expensive cologne, mixed with something else. A subtle, sweet, domestic smell that definitely wasn't my house. It smelled of fabric softener and faint, stale coffee. It smelled like a home. I pushed the door gently. It slid open silently on its runners. The light inside was bright, fluorescent, and harsh. I peered in, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against the wall of my chest. This was the final moment, the end of the uncertainty, the beginning of the end of my marriage. I stepped inside Unit 4B. The space wasn't full of dusty boxes or old tax documents. It was organized, meticulous, and completely, horrifyingly domestic. It was a small, perfectly appointed living space. There was a Persian rug on the concrete floor, a comfortable-looking deep blue armchair, a small folding desk, and several shelves lined with neatly folded clothes, personal items, and books. My eyes scanned the room, absorbing the details that confirmed years of deception. A small kitchenette area had an electric kettle and an open box of the same rare tea Michael often brought home for me. The shock was so profound I couldn't move. He wasn't just having an affair. He had built a second life, a second home, maintained with the same meticulousness he applied to his business consulting. And then I saw the wall. Hanging above the folding desk was a framed photo. It wasn't a collage or a large formal print. It was a single, simple snapshot. A family photo, happy and bright. Michael was there, smiling broadly, relaxed in a polo shirt I had never seen. Beside him stood a woman with bright dark hair, laughing. And between them, held tightly in Michael's arms, was a boy. A small, 5-year-old boy. My blood ran cold. The boy had Michael's distinctive widow's peak. He had Michael's eyes. He had Michael's chin. He was the spitting image of the man who had denied me adoption because he needed a child of his own blood. The final crushing realization hit me. He hadn't just cheated. He had an entire family. He had the son I begged him for, the son he told me I was not good enough to help him create. He built the perfect family in a climate-controlled box, preserved from the heat and chaos of our real, struggling life. I looked down at the duplicate key in my hand. It didn't feel like a gun anymore. It felt like the key to the deepest, most agonizing pain a woman could ever feel. I took 3 steps further into the room. On the small folding table next to the armchair, where one would set a cup of tea or a book, I saw 2 final confirming pieces of evidence. 1. A brand new phone charger plugged into a strip, its cord neatly coiled. The phone was missing, confirming he was here just moments ago. 2. A small, leather-bound notebook, open, displaying a school calendar with the word Liam scrawled at the top. Liam, Michael's son. The rest of his life. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The pain was too vast, too absolute for noise. I felt only a profound, cold stillness. The marriage wasn't just broken. It was exposed as a complete, cruel fabrication. I realized I couldn't stay a second longer. I wouldn't confront him. I didn't want to break his perfect little world. I just wanted to disappear from mine. I turned to leave, gently closing the metal door behind me, careful not to make a sound. I had all the evidence I needed. My one remaining decision was how to deliver the final message. I stood frozen in Unit 4B, the cold hum of the climate control unit, the only sound in the small, perfectly maintained living space. I didn't need any more evidence. The sheer, audacious banality of it was the final knife twist. This wasn't just a place for an affair. It was a sanctuary. It was where Michael went to be truly Michael, relaxed, a father, a man building a future. I looked again at the framed photo on the wall, the one showing him, the other woman, and the small boy, Liam, who was the absolute spitting image of him. Michael had refused me the right to adopt a child, arguing for the purity of his own blood, only to realize that he had secured that lineage with someone else, away from the barren silence of our beautiful home. My massive, overwhelming pain didn't manifest as tears or screaming. It was a profound, cold stillness. I felt like a porcelain doll that had been dropped from a great height. The parts were all there, but the binding structure was shattered. I realized I was the other woman in my own marriage. My life with Michael, the charity dinners, the expensive trips, the quiet evenings, was the convenient, high-end facade that funded and protected his real life. I looked at the phone charger plugged into the wall, its coiled cord waiting for the return of the missing phone. He would be back soon. He was always efficient. I knew his schedule. I knew his routine. I took 3 deep breaths, the scent of his cologne mixing with the faint odor of new fabric softener that clung to the pillows on the armchair. I had all the evidence I needed. Confrontation would give him the stage he craved, a performance of remorse, a negotiation, a lie of half-truths. I wouldn't give him that power. He didn't deserve my anger. He deserved silence. I turned and walked back toward the door. My movements were slow, deliberate. I paused only to look at the duplicate key still gripped in my hand. This tiny, insignificant object had betrayed him perfectly. I gently slid the blue metal door of Unit 4B closed, ensuring it clicked back into place, looking exactly as I had found it, a sliver of darkness at the seam. I walked swiftly back through the climate-controlled corridor, past the silent rows of blue doors and out into the sharp midday sun. I slipped out of the pedestrian gate where Josh was waiting, his expression tight with anxiety. "What did you find?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. I didn't answer immediately. I walked past him, got into my car, and started the engine. I rolled down the window. "He didn't cheat, Josh," I said, my voice eerily calm. "He built a family. He built a home. Thank you. The investigation is closed." I drove away, leaving Josh standing by his sedan, the silence of my departure louder than any confession. The drive back to the house, the home that was now a monument to my humiliation, was spent in a profound state of moral clarity. I didn't cry on the highway. I didn't rage. My mind was purely practical, focused on the immediate future. I pulled into the driveway. The house looked magnificent, bathed in the afternoon sun. It looked exactly the same as it had that morning, but it was fundamentally different. The perfection was a lie. I walked straight past the kitchen, past the perfect countertops, and went upstairs to our massive, silent bedroom. I opened the walk-in closet. The clothes were hung meticulously, Michael's expensive suits, my designer dresses. The ultimate irony. I didn't touch his side. I went to my side and pulled out one suitcase, a simple black carry-on. I packed only the essentials: documents, medication, a few changes of comfortable clothes. I didn't pack the jewelry, the designer bags, or the trinkets he'd brought me from his trips. Those things belonged to the character he thought I was. I was leaving the character behind. I went to my vanity and opened my jewelry box. Inside, nestled against the velvet lining, was the empty indentation where the duplicate key had rested. I stared at the space where the key had been. The initial proof, the source of my doubt, the key that unlocked the lie. I took the duplicate key out of my pocket and placed it on the vanity. Then, I lifted my left hand. The wedding ring was massive, a 2-carat diamond set in platinum, a symbol of the immense investment Michael had made in our gilded cage. For 20 years it had represented stability, fidelity, and our joint struggle. Now it represented the exact cost of the silence and the lie he maintained for a decade. I slid the ring off my finger. My hand felt suddenly light, unburdened. The act was definitive. I picked up the ring and the duplicate key. I carried them downstairs, bypassing the silent grandeur of the living room, and walked out the back door. The exchange in the garden. The garden looked exactly as I had left it. The earth was disturbed near the hydrangeas where I had frantically dug this morning, looking for a key that wasn't there. The weeds I had neglected were pushing up through the mulch, mirroring the truth that had pushed up through the facade of my marriage. I grabbed the gardening trowel from the shed. I knelt by the disturbed patch of earth, the same spot where Michael had furtively hidden his secret access key. I began to dig gently, creating a shallow, clean cavity. This was not a moment of rage or despair. This was ritual. This was closure. I reached into the hole and pulled out the empty metal tin Michael had used. It was the original hiding place, the symbol of the deception. I tossed it aside. I held the duplicate silver key in one hand, the key to the storage unit, the key to the second life, the key to Liam. In the other hand, I held the massive platinum wedding ring, the key to the facade, the key to the life Michael expected me to continue funding. I looked down at the empty hole. First, I placed the duplicate key into the hole. Then, I placed the massive wedding ring into the hole, resting it right beside the key that betrayed it. The ring shimmered slightly in the afternoon light, looking obscene next to the rough dirt. I paused, absorbing the symbolism. I was leaving him the key to the unit, the duplicate, and the symbol of the marriage, the ring. When he returned and checked the garden, as he eventually would, he would find the exchange. He would know I knew. The final conversation would be held in the silence of the soil. Then I took the trowel and slowly, meticulously, filled the hole. I patted the earth down firmly, ensuring the spot was smooth and unmarked, just as Michael had done when he buried his secret. This time, however, I was burying the marriage itself. I stood up. I wiped the soil from my hands, feeling the last vestiges of my old life fall away. I took one final look at the garden, the beautiful nursery of sorrow that had been my substitute motherhood. It was no longer a sanctuary. It was just a place I used to live. I walked back inside, retrieved my packed bag from the bedroom, and walked out the front door. I left the house silent, unlocked, ready for its rightful owner to return and discover that his carefully managed world had imploded without a sound. My keys were in my pocket. The expensive car was still in the driveway. I didn't need any of it. I walked to the end of the long, curving driveway and called a cab. I was Clara, and I was free. Thank you for listening to this heartbreaking story of Clara and Michael. The silent realization that your entire life was a lie is perhaps the cruelest betrayal of all. What do you think Clara should do next? Should she take Michael for everything he owns, or was leaving in silence the ultimate act of power? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. If you would like to hear second part of this story, please let us know. If you felt the weight of Clara's final decision in the garden, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next story of deception and justice. Click that bell notification and be part of our community. We need you here.